It is no measure of health to be well adjusted to a profoundly sick society. Jiddu Krishnamurti. Most people hear this quote and nod. Almost no one understands it, because if you truly understood it, you would begin to see something horrifying, something terrifying. A hidden psychological illness woven into the very structure of our world. It's an illness as old as civilization, and an illness that today shapes governments, corporations, culture, and even our personal relationships. And this illness is psychopathy. And not the Hollywood monster, and not the masked killer with a chainsaw, the real kind of psychopathy. And today we are opening that door, and it goes deep. Psychopathy comes from two Greek words, psyche, psyche, which is the cocoon, so to speak, of consciousness, the breath, the membrane between body and mind, and pathos, which is what one undergoes. Socrates says that psyche comes from the force that, I will say this in Greek, physin ohi ke ehi, which means that the power that moves and holds the very nature of a human being. Speusippus, another Platonic philosopher, calls the psyche the αυτοκίνητον, which means the self-moving principle. So the question is, what stops it from moving? And Socrates tells us that which is hindered in its motion becomes, or better, resembles those who sleep. And here we have a deep forgotten Platonic etymology for the word ψεῦδος, which is falsehood, lies. It's called ψεῦδος. I would say in English, pseudo something, pseudoscience or pseudo whatever. So ψεῦδος has two components. Εύδος, which means sleep, and ψι, which is the Greek letter that represents the tripartite soul. So together we have ψεύδος, ψι plus εύδος, which is falsehood, and lies. And this is what puts the psyche to sleep. Falsehood is not error. It is anesthetic. It sedates the psyche and disconnects it from Nous, which is the higher mind. And this is where secondary psychopathy begins, the psychological sleep of the modern world. 2. Primary versus secondary psychopathy. There are two types of psychopathy. Primary psychopathy, and it is genetic, neurological, inborn, where we have no empathy, no remorse, no conscience, cold, predatory, unchangeable. And these are cancer cells in a social organism. They drain, manipulate, devour, and destroy. Secondary psychopaths are created by manipulation, bad education, social pressure, media, trauma, and a poisoned worldview. Like a computer filled with junk programs, the psyche stops moving correctly, but unlike the primary psychopaths, they can still change. 3. Gnosis, the acceleration toward higher consciousness. Gnosis comes from gignosko, which means to know, to perceive, and symbolically, the word consists of G for Genesis, inner beginning, the first spark of awakening, N for Nous, which is the higher mind, the intuitive intellect, and then the ending osis, which means process and acceleration. So altogether we get Gnosis, which is the genesis of the self's connection to Nous, propelled in an accelerating process of awakening. Psychopathy blocks this. It strangles the higher self. It fills the inner space with noise. And true eudaimonia is achieved not by adding, but by removing the noise gradually. 4. Psychopathy as an ancient phenomenon. Psychopathy is very, very ancient, older than empires, older than recorded history, and as old as humanity itself. But our historical memory has been shattered with floods, with collapses, with book burnings, deliberate concealment. Yet the ancients knew this danger and they had systems to deal with it. At the height of the Greek city-states, they used filtering to protect society. Society was protected by a system of filters, of mechanisms that were designed to safeguard the community from psychological corruption and the rise of tyranny. First, there was selective admission to the Eleusinian Mysteries. These rites did not admit everyone because their purpose was not entertainment or mass religion. It was a process of initiation into higher consciousness. The mysteries required moral character, psychological stability, discipline, and readiness for inner transformation. And the initiates were exposed to very powerful symbolic teachings about the soul, death, and the very structure of reality. So someone unbalanced, malicious, or morally corrupt could not only misunderstand the whole experience, but endanger the entire community. The mysteries, therefore, were a filtering mechanism. They admitted only those who were capable of reverence, of self-control, and inner maturity. And the goal was to cultivate citizens with an awakened consciousness, not to initiate predators, of course. Second, there was ostracism, Ostracismos in Greek. It was a social immune system. Ostracism was a civic safeguard. It was designed to protect the polis from individuals that were considered dangerous to its harmony. The potential tyrants, the manipulators, and those whose influence carried the seeds of corruption. So once a year, the citizens could vote to temporarily exile someone for 10 years, and this was not a punishment, it was a prevention. The purpose was pretty much straightforward: remove the threat before the disease spreads. And its original function was psychological and political, to shield the city from those whose ambition, deception, or the very nature risked turning the polis towards tyranny. In essence, it was a very effective way to catch psychopathy early. And third, something even deeper existed: preventive medicine for the soul, Greek Paideia, the Greek education. Paideia was the lifelong cultivation of character, intellect, virtue, and discernment. It trained citizens to recognize deception, to govern themselves, and to resist manipulation. And it acted as an internal immune system, an education that strengthened judgment, conscience, and the capacity to live as free human beings. And its purpose was defense against psychopathy. And that's within the community and within the self. And what about today? The ones who should be filtered out, the ones who should be ostracized, the ones who could never pass through the gates of the mysteries, are the ones running society. 5. The tyranny of the narcissist. The dynamic between a narcissist and their victim is the same between tyranny and a society. What the narcissists do? They isolate, they charm, they destabilize, and they control. Tyrants do exactly the same thing, but on a collective scale. And Plato saw this. The fall from the philosopher king to then democracy to tyranny is humanity's descent into collective psychopathy. Psychopaths behave like cancer cells outside the natural harmony of the organism. Civilizations die the same way. Bodies die when the cancer spreads too far. And just like in abusive relationships, victims recognize the truth too late. And all the philosophers warned us about it, but we keep ignoring them. 6. Gurdjieff, Plato, and the structure of consciousness. Gurdjieff's fourth way divides humanity into 4 types. The first one is the householder. He is grounded and able to grow. Then we have the tramp. These are the names that Gurdjieff gives to the 4 categories. The tramp is drifting, he is unstable and trapped in impressions. Then we have the lunatic, who is disciplined but in false values, and he has a very rigid thinking. And then 4, we have, I don't know how to pronounce this, Hasnamuss. Gurdjieff used to, he was using weird words. So Hasnamuss is a true psychopath. He is totally crystallized in his egoism. And this mirrors one of the most powerful models of consciousness ever produced in human history, which is Plato's divided line in the Republic. Plato maps the ascent of the human mind through 4 levels, 4 stages of knowing and being, and divided between the visible realm and the intelligible. Let's look at it. 1. Assumption, Eikasia. This is the lowest stage. Consciousness here perceives only shadows, reflections, projections, images without any substance. And this is the realm of illusions, of entertainment, of imitation, of believing propaganda, and the constantly shifting of the appearances of the modern world. And this is where the tramp lives. The tramp is anchored in nothing. He moves between impressions, moods, opinions, never questioning, never grounding himself, drifting like a shadow through shadows. And he corresponds precisely in this level of Eikasia, the stage where the soul is totally trapped in fleeting appearances. Second, belief, Pistis. And the next stage concerns the physical world itself, taking things as they appear, accepting conventional reality. And this is where the householder stands. The householder respects order, knows that effort produces results, and recognizes that life has structure and meaning. But Plato makes a very essential distinction here. There is belief without knowledge, and there is belief informed by knowledge. Both look the same from the outside, but only one is authentic. So the difference between the two is precisely the difference between a stagnant householder and one who is ready to ascend. 3. Thought, discursive intellect, Dianoia. Here the mind begins to use reason, logic, symbols, and this is the realm of science, mathematics, analysis. It is a higher form of knowing, but still indirect. And this is where the lunatic appears. The lunatic, he uses reason, but uses it incorrectly. His thinking is very rigid, very mechanical, and very stereotyped. He applies logic to false assumptions, and therefore goes further away from truth the harder he tries. And this is the distorted side of Dianoia. It's the corruption of rationality itself. Number 4, higher intellect, Nous, Noesis. Here the soul no longer reasons but sees. The person who starts seeing through Noesis has cleared out all the psychological noise. He connects directly with the real. That is the state of the awakened self, what Jung might call the individuation, but it goes even further. This is the domain of the hero, the one who sheds illusions, the one who cuts the cords of all conditioning and reclaims the higher mind. And here we find the most horrifying parallel, because the Hasnamuss has no access to this realm. He is the complete negation of Nous. It's a consciousness that is crystallized in egoism and destruction. The Hasnamuss is the human being whose inner architecture has been inverted. He corresponds not simply to the absence of higher intellect, but to its perversion. Gnosis bridges the gap, knowledge of the world plus knowledge of self, and the householder holds the key. 7. The traits of psychopathy. Psychopaths share key traits. They show no empathy, they have no guilt, no remorse, pathological lying, predatory cunningness, a left brain sharpness without any wisdom, and right brain deficiency, and a total disregard for the truth. The Greek word ephes describes someone who has a balance between the left and right brain hemispheres and a full-grown prefrontal cortex. This balance is what allows a person to grow towards the good, the agathon. Conversely, an imbalance in the right hemisphere can create the other side, which is submissive individuals. Of course, psychopaths lack this balance of the two brain hemispheres. They are totally left brain hemisphere. The Greek word ephes describes someone who has a balance between the left brain hemisphere and the right brain hemisphere, and a fully grown prefrontal cortex. This balance is what allows a person to grow towards the good, towards the agathon. So an imbalance in the right brain hemisphere is what is creating submissive individuals, and an imbalance in the left brain hemisphere, it is what is creating psychopaths. Psychopaths lack this balance, and their mask is their very weapon. They appear charming, they appear polite, they appear caring, they appear socially skilled, but once the mask is off, everything collapses. And this is why the psychopaths gravitate towards positions of authority, because they want this control, they want this power, they crave for it. And this is the mentality of the Nazi officer, the inquisitor, the bureaucrat who ruins lives and then goes home to dinner. This is psychopathy. 8. The illusion of freedom. Frank Zappa said, "The illusion of freedom will continue as long as it is profitable. When it becomes too expensive, they will pull the plug." Most people cannot comprehend this. They project their morality onto others. But this is cognitive dissonance. Psychopaths have no moral compass. They recognize no rights. They feel nothing except the urge to dominate. They are basically outside human nature. It's a disease of the psyche. 9. The psychopathic agenda. Psychopaths try to replicate themselves. They create cynicism, numbness, moral inversion, obedience, confusion, and intellectual sleep. Primary psychopaths rarely face consequences, and then secondary psychopaths adopt the same mindset, because psychopathy spreads like a psychic virus. We have endured centuries of multidimensional brainwashing from people who mastered human nature long ago, ancient manipulators that are experts in psychological architecture. 10. Finding the way forward. The path forward begins with one thing: responsibility. Beautiful word. Response and ability. We need to read, we need to think, we need to speak, and we need to reclaim our mind. Only then we can help secondary psychopaths to return to themselves. Primary psychopaths fail only when society awakens. Corporations intentionally recruit psychopaths for leadership because they are cold. They are very efficient and very ruthless. Psychopaths can be very, very clever people, but that's far away from real intelligence. It is calculative cleverness. And we now live in a system run by primary psychopaths, staffed by secondary psychopaths, and supported by millions. And this is something that has been cultivated through school, through media, through the very language distortion, through the propaganda we are fed since we are little kids. People talk about the Great Reset of Klaus Schwab, but the Great Reset happened long before Klaus Schwab, and it happened before the Middle Ages, and we are still inside it. 11. Philosophy as Eros. Erotisi, which is question in Greek, comes from Eros, because it's the desire to ask why. The why is the erotic spark of awakening, and that's the quest inside the question. True philosophy is not triacademia, it's the soul's longing for truth. So why not bringing the beautiful into the world? And that's not going to come through rituals, through praise, through wishful thinking, but through the unity of thought, emotion, and action. This is exactly what society needs, and this is what the world needs, and this is what you and I need. So, I will leave you with a question. Who are you? Are you a psychopath? Are you a sociopath? Or a healthy human being capable of awakening? And the answer is never in my or your words. It is in what me and you, we will do next.